Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All Sports Now. My name is Cory Sparks. I'm your main host. This is a podcast where we cover many sports with a variety of guest hosts and do all things possible to keep all of you entertained. Make sure you follow our socials before we get this thing started to get sports and podcast updates on a daily basis. We are at all.sportsnow on Instagram, at allsportsnowpod on Twitter, and all sports now, 3 separate words, on YouTube. Then make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify. Just get our notifications on whatever listening platform you are currently listening to us on. Also, make sure you follow our new partners, Notion Gaming, on Instagram at Notion_gaming. They have some great stuff coming out, and we are collabing and we just have the recordings stocked up, so we will be posting some content soon as well. Today, we have the show's editor, Ryan Patton, back on to talk all about the NBA playoffs now that they are somewhat back to normal. So we're going to be talking about each series matchup, who we think should win the MVP award, the crowd interference situation that's been going on for the past couple of weeks, and much more right here on All Sports Now.
Steps into it, pass is caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it! And the Cubs have finally won it all! 8-7-10! We'll go! Rebound Bosch! Back out to Allen! His three-pointer! Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 22 of the All Sports Now podcast. Before we get going with some basketball talk between me and the show's editor, Ryan, here's a couple general sports updates just to keep everyone in the loop. In golf, Phil Mickelson, the 50-year-old, took home the win at the PGA Championship a couple of weeks ago to become the oldest golfer to ever win a major. Lightweight boxer Devin Haney remained undefeated last week by defeating Jorge Linares via unanimous decision, so he is now 26-0. And Jake Paul will now fight 5-time UFC champ Tyron Woodley on August 28th after Paul signed a 2-fight contract with Showtime Boxing. That's enough of that. We're going to get to some basketball talk. The playoffs have been definitely interesting, but before we get into the series and everything, who do you think is going to win the MVP award? They will be announcing that momentarily.
I feel like I would be in the same boat of Steph. Winning it, but at the end of the day, a lot of people kind of look at the fact of did they make the playoffs or not. Since he didn't, that kind of hurts his chances of winning, in my opinion. And like I said before, I think Joel Embiid had a strong case, but I think after this last game, closing out the Portland Trailblazers, I feel like Jokic will take it. And plus, I think he deserves one too. I think he's been a big part of the Nuggets playoff success. Not that they've won a championship or anything, but, the Nuggets have never really been a contender in the last decade or so, up until the point that he was on the team. So I feel like he deserves at least one at this point because he's definitely improved that team.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a stronger case for Jokic now. I was liking Steph. Again, this is like our 3rd or 4th time trying to record this, but at the time I was liking Steph, and I understand it's a regular season award, and if the award was truly based off the regular season, I would think to give it to Steph just because he was playing with a G League team. Like, I honestly think they would be at or even worse than they were a couple years ago. I mean, this team is bad. Like, they had Kelly Oubre, and they thought he was going to be their second best player, and that dude just turned out so bad. I think he shot like 40% from the field. But and then Clay was out. So I wanted to give it to Steph. There were 2 games in a row this year where he didn't play the first one and they lost by over 40. It was their worst franchise loss ever.
God damn it.
In the history of the Warriors. And then the next game he plays and they win by over 40. So he definitely has a huge impact, and I think he puts the valuable and most valuable player. I also think there's a strong case for Chris Paul. If you look what he's done with that Suns team, again, we will talk about the series soon, but they are in a very good spot right now as they head into the second round. But I'm going to have to agree with you in that I think Jokic has a strong case as this whole season develops more and more. Once Jamal Murray went out with that ACL injury and I saw that the 3-6 matchup was going to be the Nuggets and the Trailblazers, I was like, you know what? It's Dame time. And I had the Trailblazers beating them 4-2, and it happened the other way around. So I have to give Jokic a lot of credit. He's been putting on an absolute clinic. I still don't know how he does it. He looks so unathletic when he's on the floor, but they're doing fine. I mean, they won 4-2. They took care of business despite the fact that Dame was putting up almost 40 a game, and I have to respect it. So I'm probably going to give it to him too. I think back to the last time the Nuggets were relevant, and I'm thinking when Carmelo played for them, like right before 2010, and then the whole blockbuster free agency period happened where he ended up going to the Knicks. Still salty about that. He should have gone to the Bulls. We would have won some championships. But no, I mean, and then they had this super long rebuilding period. You know, they get Jamal Murray, they get Michael Porter Jr., and they have Jokic, and they have this really young core. And this is the first time, even in the playoffs, but they haven't been like, they were nobody's finals favorite. And I think this year they are a couple people's finals favorites just because they're still relevant even after losing arguably their best player. But now it looks like their best player is Jokic. So next thing we're going to talk about right before we crack into all 8 of these series is the fan intervention. There have been incidents before, like Meta World Peace a couple decades ago, where he jumped in and started punching a fan in the crowd. But we didn't have any fans for about a year, roughly, and we didn't have any in the playoffs last year because it was the bubble. There were like family members, a couple of friends, but it was not a spectator atmosphere at all. There were not random people paying to go and see these players. Now there are, and we're seeing... I'm like losing track of all of it now, but I know Kyrie Irving had a water bottle thrown at him. Ja Morant's parents had racial slurs yelled at them. There's more. I think Trae Young got spit on at Madison Square Garden. I mean, I'm probably missing some because it's happening so often. I personally just think it's pathetic because these fans, they had to watch from home for a while. Now they have the privilege to go and watch these professional basketball players put on a show in a playoff atmosphere at Madison Square Garden. They have not seen the playoffs in a while, let's be honest. And this is what they do? Like, what's your take on this behavior, I guess?
I feel like what I will say is, like, you know, I feel like this is how everybody feels, so I feel like I'd be just kind of just preaching to the choir, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous, you know. And I mean, for me, I love sports. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like a lot of people take, especially basketball, way too seriously, you know, like when it comes to disrespecting players and coaches and stuff, because I feel like a lot of people forget that they're also people. So it's like I saw like a video for example of like when the Knicks lost to the Hawks, which I expected that just because the Knicks made it to the playoffs does not mean they're making it past the first round. But I saw a lot of Knicks fans like basically disrespecting the Hawks and some of their best players, you know, saying that, you know, that they're absolute trash human beings, and like just kind of just saying some really disrespectful stuff that if it wasn't for basketball, they wouldn't be saying that. So I feel like a lot of people are just getting too passionate. There's like, it's okay to be passionate about a sport, but we shouldn't be putting players' well-beings into the situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when it comes to the fact that you're like attacking someone as a person, I think that's where the line should get drawn. You can comment on someone's performance. You're at a game. You could say someone sucks. You could say this. You could say that. You could say they're cocky. And it's safe to say Trae was feeding off of a lot of that. I mean, at the end of the series, I don't know if you saw, he took a bow at Madison Square Garden. And I honestly held my breath for a second because of how they've been acting towards him. I thought someone was going to throw who knows what at him, and they didn't. But like, there's going to be that banter back and forth, like you said. But once you start, again, like you said, attacking them as a person, you know, addressing their whole existence, I believe that's way too far. You're no longer commenting on the basketball player. You're attacking someone as a person, and they're part of the reason you're there. Like, you did not show up to watch some scrubs. You watched some professional basketball, and with the exception of the last couple of years, the USA has been one of the best countries for basketball, if not the best. So, here to watch performance. Fans are supposed to intervene. They're supposed to cheer. There's supposed to be a home court advantage, but I think it gets out of hand once they start throwing stuff and attacking people, like you said.
Yeah, like where the line is drawn for me is it's just, if you're gonna, like, it's okay to boo somebody. If you don't like a player, that's cool, whatever. You're not gonna like everybody in real life as it is, but you know, as soon as we're spitting, throwing water bottles, getting arrested outside of the arena, I think I think the NBA needs to take a step in, maybe throw out some lawsuits if that's what it's going to take, maybe do a few more rules, or even, and this is like so extreme, put a cage around the court at this point.
Yeah, honestly, because
like,
you see
or
the
glass or something.
Yeah,
because
people are running out on there.
Yeah, it's getting unacceptable at this point. Like, we're going to have to treat it like it's hockey. And, you know, as soon as we do that is when people are going to complain. So it's like, pick a struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just going to say, they're already disciplining people pretty hard. Once the second you step foot on a court, first of all, that is a lifetime ban. Probably at most sporting events in general. Like, if you streak, I'm pretty sure you cannot go to any sporting events anymore. Or it'd be really hard, because the first thing they do when they take you to prison is they fingerprint you. So, like, they know you. You know, you're not getting away with that. That's not something you can change. But I guess the next step would be security. You have to prevent it from happening at first, because I feel like when someone goes onto the court, they're like, well, I might as well make it worth it. This is going to be my last time. And it's like, that is not going to bode very well. Now more people are going to grab it and go, yeah, might as well make it worth it. I'm not going to go here every year anyway. So,
right, exactly.
It's not smart. So I know the cage kind of sounds outlandish, but it might be the only solution. Or get more security guards so they can't run halfway across the court and get their 15 seconds of fame before they get tackled.
Exactly.
So now we're going to run through all 8 series, most of which are done. We just have one that's about to go to Game 7 that will be done by the time this podcast is up. So we'll have a little prediction there just to kind of see what happens in Game 7. Series we're going to go over is one that I don't think anyone was shocked about. The 76ers beat the Wizards in 5. I'm impressed that it went 5. I really thought it was going to be the easiest sweep ever. They went up 3-0, and then Russ and Bradley Beal stole one. You shocked?
Not shocked at all. I think in terms of the breakdown for this one, I had the 76ers all the way because I know the type of player Russell Westbrook is. Because, like, side story, I was working with somebody one time, and they said that they never liked Kevin Durant because of the move that he made to the Warriors. My counter argument to that was, okay, it's fine if you don't like him, but then you also have to remember this. Kevin was never going to win a championship with Russell Westbrook because of the type of player he is. He needs a team that he can lead and then suck at leading. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the fact that he made it to 8th seed is a miracle to me. So it's kind of just like, unless if you basically the only thing that the Wizards can do is not have Russell on his team, because the way that Russell plays, he's never going to win a championship. So going into this matchup, I was not surprised of how it turned out. And the only thing I will say going into the next series, I don't think that the 76ers are going to do well if they can't get Joel Embiid back, because, like, when, you know, the first game that he was out is when Russ stole one. So I don't know how the rest of the team is going to kind of function in this next round. But in terms of this first round, there's not really much to say. You kind of already knew that they were going to go in and dominate. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'd say the same, honestly. I mean, and just to be clear for anyone listening, we both are very aware that Russ puts up extremely good numbers and he's extremely athletic. He just doesn't play winning basketball. I mean, he's been on really good teams, and now the fact that he actually took this Wizards team to where they were, sure, it's impressive, but like Ryan said, the way he wants to take over, and he's not an efficient three-point shooter. That has always been the story. He's been a coast-to-coast, drive to the rim, bully someone like they're a 4 or 5 down low, even though he is a point guard who's extremely fast. He just tries to bull rush his way down every single time, which if you try that with him on 2K, it goes pretty well, by the way. But it's just not winning basketball in our opinions. No knock to him, though. Triple-doubles leader now, that's great and all, but he's not doing anything in Washington. I agree. I mean, the Hawks look really good with Trae Young, Clint Capella, Weirder as well. I'm sure I'm missing a few names in terms of their depth, but Ball's not playing. I would have the Hawks in 6 or 7 there. So he's got to get back, and he's got to get back quick. Next series we have is the Nets beating the Celtics 4-1. Very similar result in terms of what I expected, to be honest with you. The Nets are loaded. I do not have to ramble off all the names because I literally ramble off their entire lineup. And the Celtics didn't have Jaylen Brown, and they just didn't seem to play that hard this year. I think Brad Stevens is on a really short leash. I would not be shocked if he gets fired. It's not their fault they ran into the Nets, but it is their fault that they were such a low seed and had to go up against a powerhouse anyway. kudos to Tatum for stealing that one game. High praise from Kevin Durant after that series, saying Jason Tatum is one of the best players he's ever gone up against in the playoffs. But that team needs some work. They took a big step back. They were my finals favorites a couple years ago, and even last year I thought they were going to go far, and they did okay. I mean, they whooped the 76ers in the first round last year, but this year was a different story, and I expected it.
Yeah, I also expected it, to be honest with you. I mean, Jaylen Brown, I think he's a really huge part of that team. I think a lot of people kind of forget that when Kyrie was out that one year when they were in the playoffs, they went to the Western Conference Finals without him because of players like Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown was a huge part of that team when Kyrie was not there. So then, of course, now that Kyrie is obviously not there anymore in terms of, not being on the roster, he was a huge part of their team. And I'm not saying that Jason Tatum is not a good player, but he's going to have to score 50 points a night if they wanted to even come back in that series at that point, which he tried to. But I think when it comes to Kemba Walker as a leader, I don't really think he's as good of a player as he was on the Hornets. I mean, because it's kind of like a Russ situation, but less cocky. I think he's kind of used to being, the main facilitator. So then I feel like he's kind of out of his element when he's playing with other people for the first time, now that he has help. So I feel like he's still kind of adjusting to that in terms of his play style. But I feel like if you give them a couple more years when Jaylen Brown is officially back from being hurt, have them build up some chemistry, because they've only been playing with each other for a couple seasons. They still need a little bit more time to really get their groove going. I feel like it would have been a different story, but the Nets are just too stacked. Like, I'm surprised that it wasn't a sweep, to be honest with you. They're just too stacked. So I don't blame the coach. I don't blame the Celtics too much. I feel like it would have been like maybe a 4-2 series if Jaylen Brown was playing, but otherwise, yeah, not really a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets are built to go deep. I really hope they don't. I hope it ends up being a dumpster fire, and we all know my take on that. But
yeah.
But I mean, they got past him in the first round. The Kemba situation is interesting because, like you said, he's on a really bad team in the Hornets. I think the best they ever got up to was like a 7 or maybe a 6 seed. You take him and put him on a really good team with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and he can't be the leader anymore, and it's showing. I mean, I feel like he does look out of his element, and that he's surrounded by a lot more talent, and he kind of had to play more of a facilitator role instead of that takeover guy. And even when he tried to take over, he was really inefficient this year. He shot in the low 40s percentage wise, so hopefully he can adapt. But I was looking for a better transition for him, but it's always a wild card when you take someone out of a team that's been rebuilding for a while. Sorry, Michael Jordan. And they looked good this year until LaMelo got hurt, but he definitely looks like he's out of his element and that he's surrounded by some talent. So we'll see how he adjusts to that. Next one we have, I'm not sure there's much to say here, and that the Bucks showed up. They played the Heat like they did last year, except they didn't play them at all like they did last year. They whooped them. It was the only sweep this year, 4-0. My only theory for why this was different, because most things looked the same other than the fact Eric Bledsoe is not jacking up 40 shots a game and calling ISO and throwing it off the backboards. I hate Eric Bledsoe, if you can't tell already, but Drew Holiday replaced him, and he was a really good facilitator. That's the only thing that I could see being different. Otherwise, I mean, the NBA was put on pause, and Jimmy Butler is known as one of the hardest workers in the NBA. So my thought is, when Corona took over, Jimmy did not stop, and other people maybe stopped for a bit, went to spend time with their family. Jimmy the court is his family. So yeah, I think they just had a lot of hard work going on, and they never stopped practicing. I think maybe the Bucks did.
I think personally, I kind of agree with that. I just think that, well, there's two things. The difference between last year and this year is, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. The Bucks don't have Bledsoe anymore. Bledsoe was kind of like their unlucky charm at that point. Like, he was such, they would give him the ball, and then I feel like they were going to lose the rest of the game. It's like they would be up by 20, and then Bledsoe gets the ball more, and then they'd blow the lead. It was just tough to watch, right? And now the difference is, now Milwaukee has an actual big three. So they're a more powerful team coming in, versus last year, they were still an average team because they didn't have a big three. They were mainly still kind of relying on Giannis. But now that Giannis has a little bit less of a workload, because Drew Holiday and then Chris Middleton is now like a big part of the team. they have a big three, and they're able to kind of share the load a bit and be able to play more team ball. And then on the Miami side, Jimmy's the only one out there, essentially. You know, he's surrounded by a team that doesn't work as hard as him, and it's just not, quite frankly, is not as good as him. So, you know, I don't blame him for going 4 for 26 one night in 8 turnovers, because he's the only one doing something. He's the only one that is capable of doing something. So they're just not the same team as they were last year, and I feel like that's why there was a sweep.
Yeah, and I mean, he took over last year. He played 48 minutes in the majority of the game, so I don't know if he just got too comfortable, but it seemed like they had a lot of pieces with Dragic, Harrell, Nunn, Adebayo. But this year, they looked to him over and over and over, and eventually you're going to tire your workhorse out if you do that. Next series we have is one that I did not expect to go 5. These are 2 teams that did not make the playoffs last year, so as a result, I thought it would be close. It was not. Trae Young knocked out the Knicks in 5 games. I didn't expect this. I thought the Knicks, seeing how Julius Randle was doing and seeing how Derrick Rose was doing off the bench, I thought this team was going to pull it out in 7. And they didn't at all. Kudos to Trae Young for taking over from the beginning. He set the tempo with his game winner in game 1, and they really never looked back. Julius Randle kind of disappeared. And RJ Barrett as well. The Knicks team just didn't look strong, and they tried to fight the Hawks like every 5 minutes. So I feel like that was kind of a display of frustration, but Knicks did not look good. I don't know what you saw, but I saw kind of a shocker there. I know the Knicks aren't usually going to go far, and they have a horrible reputation, but the fact that they got to the playoffs and Julius Randle was a double-double machine, I was thinking, you know what? They might get it out in 7, and I was wrong. But what did you have?
No, Julius Randle did not show up at all. You know, because he went in the regular season. Well, obviously it's the East, so I can't really say much. But he went into the regular season playing really good. He was playing some great basketball. Then he gets to the playoffs and he averages like 15, 16 points a game in the entire series. And I'm like, you can't come into the playoffs playing like that. That's what differentiates you from a good player to an all-star. You can't be you can't be playing like that, especially against somebody like Trae Young, who can score at will. I mean, I would argue that Trae Young is probably the only guy out there as well, but he still has a little bit of help in Clint Capella on defense, stuff like that, right? But still, when someone like Trae Young scores 30 to 40 points a night, you can't be scoring 15, 16 against that, because then you're going to lose every time. So I feel like if Julius Randle works on his game in the offseason, maybe he tries to become more of a scorer, then maybe that team will get a little bit better. Because, I mean, Derrick Rose, he was doing everything that he could off the bench. He was doing pretty well, but at the end of the day, he's off the bench. He can't really do much. So, I don't know. The Knicks just needs to work on team ball, maybe work on some emotional checks, stuff like that. Like, try not to fight the other team just because you're losing. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I think just overall they just need a little bit of some work in the offseason. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And the next thing we have here is it's a series that I was talking about with Kyle Davis from the Davis Sports Feed before, and that it went 4-1. The Jazz beat the Grizzlies in 5. The Jazz actually lost the first game to the AC Grizzlies because they benched Donovan Mitchell like last second. You know, his doctor said he was good to go. The team doctor said he wasn't good to go, and he was really mad about it. I think it was an ankle injury or something of that sort. He wanted to be in, and ultimately it paid off. So I guess, the Jazz, they're legit, and they got Jordan Clarkson off the bench as well. Ingles, despite the fact he is a meme, is a really good defender. Gobert is a DPOY candidate once again. So, I mean, Ja Morant looked good, but that was about it, to be honest. I mean, there was a huge gap in talent. I really didn't have a doubt that the Jazz were going to pull this off. It was just a matter of when and not if.
Pretty much. Donovan Mitchell is a very big part of that team, and once he's on the floor, I feel like that's the series right there. They could have swept if he played game 1, but I'm a firm believer of player health over anything, because I feel like if the doctor said that he would have been good to go if he wasn't, not good to go, you know what I'm saying? I feel like Donovan Mitchell would have been out for like the next year or two. It happened with Kevin Durant. It's probably gonna happen with Anthony Davis now.
Yep. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But,
Yeah, otherwise, not really much to say about that series. Kind of figured it was going to be the Jazz just as soon as Donovan Mitchell stepped on the floor. So,
yeah, that one was pretty cut and dry. And then here's the series where whoever wins this is going to go up against the Jazz in the second round. So in the Western Conference semifinals in that quadrant, the Mavs and Clips are going 7. I had the Clips going into this. I think I'm going to stick with them. Luka takes over pretty much every other night. Or not deep. I'm sorry, Kristaps Porzingis. You look lost. I don't think you know where you are. He's one of the softest bigs I've ever seen. People are calling him a waste of height. I mean, he goes in there and he tries to work around you. Go through, go over, use your height. If I was as tall as you, I sure would try that, or at least I'd like to think so. He's another one of those cases where you put him in a really good spot in like the Knicks when he was drafted, and he's going to look amazing. You put him on a team that's trying to contend for playoffs year after year. He doesn't look good. He is their second best player, and he's not good. Hardaway kind of showed up, but then he disappeared in the playoffs. This is another one of those situations where Luka's got to put up 50 to help this team win. Luka's doing fine. He's had a good game every single time. It's just been whether it's enough or not. And 3 times out of 6, it has not. I think the Clippers are too deep. I hate Paul George and how cocky he's got, but I kind of don't blame him for acting the way he does because the entire world hates him now for some reason. Probably because he chokes in the playoffs, but he started to look really good this year. Kawhi looks really good. This team is deep, and I think depth is going to win it. You can't work Luka too hard, and they're going to try to, but he doesn't have help.
I was going to say, I thought it was going to be, because this is the most interesting series because of who the Clippers are. Because as a team, they always kind of they always kind of drop the ball as soon as it matters. Quite literally, actually, because their turnovers go up. But they're kind of a team that they should be good defensively, but then you see them in games like Game 4 where they were getting blown out. For what reason? You have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on your team. Where is the defense? But then you also have games like last night where they kept it close throughout most of the game. So I'm like, they're never consistent enough, and that's why I didn't pick them for my win. But at this point, now that we're at a Game 7, unless if Luka scores like 50 and then Kristaps Porzingis wakes up, I feel like they're going to lose tonight. So we'll see. It's the most interesting because you can tell that Luka's alone. And like people can argue he's complaining too much to the refs. And I'm like, well, when you're the only good player on your team and you're trying to score as much points as you can, I don't blame you for complaining a little bit, especially when it was a foul. So it's like, yeah, I would probably give it to the Clippers tonight too, but we'll see. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis being asleep and needs to wake up. If you ask me, he's been asleep for a couple of years. That man sucks. But
that's true.
he is a waste of height, but that's another conversation. So next series we have, not much to say here because we kind of mentioned Jokic before. Hats off to him. I had Dame and CJ McCollum and Nurkic taking this, and I think 7 or 6. I filled out one of those detailed brackets, but I just posted the one where I had the winners. I had the Trailblazers taking this one. It was a 6-3 matchup, and I had the 6 coming out because Jamal Murray wasn't there, but Nuggets didn't need Jamal Murray. I don't know if they're going to go much farther because they will have to run into the Suns after this, but hats off to them for taking down a really good team. The Trailblazers do not play defense. I mean, you see Dame scoring like 45 every single night. It doesn't matter. Like, they do not get back on defense. There's been so many times they'll have a poster or a Dame will shoot from the logo, and they will celebrate for the next 5 seconds. They'll all go up and dap him up, and the other team scores. Like, those add up. So that was their issue, in my opinion.
I think another issue, and this is nothing against Dame or anything, but this is a very unpopular opinion. I don't think he's ever going to win a championship in Portland unless if they put someone other than CJ McCollum on his team, because you've seen it time and time again. They'll make it into the playoffs and they'll get knocked out the first round or the second round because CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard just are not getting it done. They're really not. You know, it doesn't matter who you put around those two. At the end of the day, Damian is way better of a player than CJ McCollum. So unless if they get somebody like as maybe a big 3 or put in some trades, I don't think that like they're going to win a championship anytime soon. And Damian Lillard, his prime is kind of running out. And in the next few years, it's going to be running out. And you want to win as many championships in your prime as you can. So, but I think he's running out of time in terms of that.
He's got a lot of good years in the league, but in terms of his prime, this is the time to win now. So unless if they maybe trade CJ McCollum or maybe trade some of their starters for some better bigs, I don't think that they'll ever win past the first or second round, especially when you're going up against teams like Jokic, like we said earlier, of how well he plays even without Jamal Murray.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's in his lower 30s right now. I don't know his exact age, but he's running out of time, and they got to be more defensive minded in Portland, or they got to surround him with someone else, because I think CJ, he blew up a couple years ago, and he tries to take over, and I'm sorry, he's just not as efficient as people make him look. He's stupid with the ball sometimes, especially in crunch time, and you can't have that when you have someone like Dame who's trying to take home a championship. They couldn't even get through the first round this time. Usually they're able at least to get to round two, but they went up against the limping Nuggets team, and they lost to likely the MVP. So there's some changes that have to go on there. This is the series that I was watching the closest. The Suns took down the Lakers in 6. I do have the Suns winning the whole thing this year. Devin Booker has always been a talent. They needed an on-court coach, and they got arguably the best in the game in Chris Paul. True facilitator, true point guard, up there in assists for history. He's positively impacting everyone. He was out there for half the series with like dislocated shoulder or something, or separated shoulder, and he didn't really have to do much. He was out there calling his shots. You don't need your shoulder for that. And he was coaching this team to a win. And no disrespect to Monty Williams, obviously he's doing great as the actual coach for the team. In my opinion, the big story was they should not have let Anthony Davis go out there. I mean, I'm sorry, you see dangerous I understand how much of a priority winning is. I understand that Anthony Davis was probably not going to take no for an answer. Ultimately, you can make the executive decision to put your 5 out there and not include him. You do not want another Kevin Durant situation where there's permanent damage to this person's career and their life. Possibly. We didn't know Kevin Durant was going to recover. That was a 1.5-year recovery period. Davis goes out there, plays 4 games, and he's walking gingerly the entire time. So good series by the Suns to take care of business. LeBron was operating at like 70% as well. So take of that as you will. But what did you think of this series?
So I was actually talking to my friend Danny at work, and he's a big Lakers fan. So he was like, "Oh, Lakers in 6, right?" And then I made like that tough, argument of, "No, the Suns in 6." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, here's the thing. LeBron is probably one of the greatest players of all time, but you've seen it time and time again. It's kind of the same thing with the Cavaliers, where I don't even know why he stayed there for so long and only won one championship. But you saw it in you saw it here, especially in the final game. If LeBron doesn't have somebody helping him, especially at his age at this point, he's not going to be able to carry. Like, I wasn't surprised that in the first quarter they were down by 20, because there's nobody else out there but LeBron. He can't do everything, especially not at this age anymore. So that's why I was so upset when they made Anthony Davis play, because I'm like, we're going to have the same situation now for the next 2 years. We're going to be questioning if he can ever play again. So, it was just that was the main difference maker, was that Anthony was not on the floor. LeBron and Anthony, they're a very deadly duo in the West. That's why they won last year, and they could have went all the way this year if they didn't have so many injuries. So,
yeah, that was his main supporter. I love Dennis Schroeder. I love when they got him. I thought he was a huge upgrade. I guess not, though. He just didn't show up. He was a very inefficient shooter. Once LeBron got the ball, he got double-teamed every time. That forced him into a facilitator role. For the first couple games, I was yelling at the TV going, LeBron, why don't you take over? One, he's still hurt. I mean, he has not been 100% in a while with that ankle. And 2, they're double-teaming him, and he's 36. And he doesn't have anyone to really help him to take the pressure off him. He passes it to someone else. They're not drawing 2 people. 2 people aren't guarding Dennis Schroeder or Alex Caruso or KCP. Like, they're not going to, because they don't have to. If the person brains it, sure, that's a lucky one. If you leave LeBron on one person, we know what's going to happen. So he never really was covered by one person. Once he got within 25 feet with the ball, they were on him. So kudos to the Suns, honestly. Really deep team in Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Jay Crowder. Who else? Mikal Bridges. Cameron Payne really showing up after being garbage on the Bulls a couple years ago. I don't know where you came from, but good stuff, I guess. I think that's all we got. Ryan, you got anything else?
No, I mean this playoffs, man. I'm just glad that it's kind of somewhat back to normal. That first round was really interesting. I mean, aside from a few 4-1s, where it's like it was kind of pretty clear that they were going to win. I feel like history is just going to be made this year, especially since the Suns, like this past this series, they did not make it past the first round since 2010. So it was kind of just like
it was a good moment for them, and I feel like this might be the year that Chris Paul finally wins a championship, because he's a legendary point guard, and I don't want him to go and I don't want him to be a legend and never have won a championship. You know what I mean? So, but other than that, pretty interesting first round so far.
As an NBA fan myself, that one would have hurt if I had to see Chris Paul hanging up without a championship. Looks good for the Suns so far. Looks good for a couple other teams as well. We will see how it plays out. Make sure you follow Ryan's podcast at Toast on Rye on Instagram. Make sure you give his recent episode a listen. His YouTube will be linked in the bio there. Make sure you follow All Sports Now. We already plugged ourselves at the beginning, and we will see you next time right here on All Sports Now.
So I think it's time we say goodbye. What's the point to all of this?